You already know this man. He is culturally reactionary, socially maladjusted, exploitative, and misogynistic. He occupies every social stratum of society, from the boardroom to the basement. He is the Chud. And in our previous 2 expeditions, we cataloged some of the most dangerous male pathologies horror cinema has ever produced. But we had no idea how deep the rot goes. Which is why today, we are taking our terrible taxonomy somewhere it has never gone before. Into the darkest heart of chudness. Into the wild. To explore at great personal peril the cruelest creeps of earth, sea, and sky. So, without further ado, spoilers ahead for the following movies. We begin today's terrible taxonomy down under, where everything is bigger and deadlier, including its chuds. Our first specimen is Tucker, a bleached blonde bottom feeder who runs a shark cage diving operation off the Gold Coast of Australia, which, I gotta say, is a super convenient front for shark-based serial murder. Tucker was attacked by a shark as a child, and came to regard the experience as an awakening to his calling as a nihilistic sea chud, and ever since he has built his miserable life around the pretension of being an apex predator, building a psychopathic worldview around sharks. He lures women onto his boat with the shark cage tourism gig, chains them below deck, drugs them, makes them poop in a bucket, and then dangles them overboard in a bait harness and tortures them to death by shark attack, all the while recording the atrocities with a shoddy VHS camera like some shitbag Steven Spielberg. Tucker is a true serial killer. He keeps his victims' hair as trophies, which he then ties into fly lures because symbolism. Every night, he compulsively rewatches their lurid deaths on VHS. We see dozens of such tapes in his collection, and this is what makes Tucker the master baiter. The master baiter doesn't kill with his own hands if he can avoid it. Rather, he sets the conditions and lets nature do his dirty work for him, fancying himself as something like its avatar, its greasy priest. His hatred for women is exceeded only by his need to watch them suffer. Tucker is a voyeur first, a serial killer second, and a coward above all else. The murder is almost incidental. So the plot of Dangerous Animals is pretty simple. It consists of kidnapped Zephyr's stubborn, almost superhuman refusal to lay down and die, and Tucker's gleeful sadism in the sport of recapturing her. He likens this process to marlin fishing, and that's his whole shtick, essentially. She escapes, he recaptures her, but each time grows more unhinged and more off balance. Because the masturbator is a bargain bin predator who felt entitled to prey but got a Terminator-class surfer girl instead. And when Tucker finally manages to get Zephyr in the water for the final time, when the conditions are just right, the camcorder is rolling, and the masturbator is at the peak of his prowess, something else arrives. A great white shark. The thing that attacked Tucker as a child, which he then claimed as his totemic spirit. His proof that he belongs at the top of the food chain with the big boys. And the great white just casually swims past Zephyr in a moment of peaceful coexistence, sparing her and conferring on her the blessing of the ocean or some shit. And in so doing, puts the lie to all of Tucker's intolerable posturing. She then stealths back on the boat and spear guns the masturbator, turning him into masturbate. And the great white reduces Tucker to chum while his own camera records his spectacular demise. The masturbator was a cosplay carnivore, and to the great white, scarred, ancient, and indifferent to Tucker's oceanic incel propaganda, the final girl was found worthy, and the final chud was found edible. And speaking of being found edible, now, I know what some of you are thinking. Is Ricky Park from Nope really chudworthy? Yes, because men who exploit and abuse animals for profit live in that same pathological zip code as men who exploit and abuse people, and I will die on that hill. And yet Ricky is the most tragic entry in this taxonomy because he came by his pathology honestly. As a child actor on the 90s sitcom Gordy's Home, he watched a chimpanzee, driven to psychotic break by the conditions of his captivity, go full face-eater on his fellow cast members. He witnessed firsthand and at close range exactly what it costs you when you treat a wild, sentient creature like an object. And then he decided to recreate the conditions of that catastrophe, but way, way bigger this time. Because Ricky Park is the ringmaster, a wholesale exploiter of creatures, great and small, who gives not a single shit about how deeply they suffer for his spectacle. The dark irony of this character is written into his wardrobe. In the grammar of Western films, the white hat means good guy. Jupe wears one, and Jean Jacket, the alien predator he has been secretly feeding OJ's horses to in exchange for an extraterrestrial air show, resembles one from below, pale and terrible. Two white hats. One is a monster who kills horses, and the other is an alien who eats them for dinner. Because Jupe is a serial horse killer. Like the masturbator, he traps the innocent and feeds them to dangerous animals for his own gain. Only he murders horses instead of women. He is a predator with a family-friendly exterior. A man with a trauma-themed gift shop, for Christ's sake, who has been quietly feeding beautiful, intelligent creatures to an extraterrestrial killing machine in his endless quest for cultural cachet. Animals he purchased from OJ at exploitative prices, knowing full well the horse trainer's dire financial straits and using them accordingly. Ricky Park's comeuppance, when it finally arrives, is total. Because instead of sucking up OJ's aptly named horse Lucky, Jean Jacket takes the ringmaster, his wife and kids, and his audience in one of the most gut-wrenching sequences I've ever had the privilege of witnessing on an IMAX screen. An alien the size of a football field hoovering up bleachers full of terrified people, slowly digesting them through its nightmare innards as it rips through the sky like an extraterrestrial fire engine with screaming tourists for a siren before mercilessly juicing them all over the Haywoods Ranch. Ricky Park fucked around and dozens of innocent people found out. The ringmaster came to believe that the show, the spectacle, is always worth its cost. And for Ricky Park, that cost, up until the events of Nope, had always been paid by someone else. His crime and his tragedy is that he genuinely doesn't see the horses as beings worthy of respect and care.
The beautiful innocent creature, what did she ever do to you?
And the ultimate price of admission is paid in full by everyone he loves. And speaking of paying the price in full, our next chud of the wood is Pelle, the soft boy psychopath at the center of Ari Aster's Midsommar. Pelle belongs to the Harga, an isolated commune of nature-worshipping, human-sacrificing pagans deep in the Swedish hinterlands. His parents both died in a fire, and given what we learn about the Harga's summer barbecues, this is probably not a coincidence. The Harga breathe weird. They walk stupid, and they really don't like it when you interrupt their retirement parties or tinkle on their ancestral tree. Pelle's function within this crunchy culty commune is procurement. He sources outsiders for fresh breeding stock and blood sacrifice, cultivating a biome of breathtaking natural beauty until his victims walk right into it willingly, deploying folksy charm, magic mushrooms, and cult indoctrination tactics so sophisticated they'd make a Scientologist shit out all their thetans. And this is what makes Pelle the strangler vine. The strangler vine grows with its victims, nurtures them, wraps around them supportively until the hosts can no longer survive without it. And by then, the question of survival is the vine's to answer. Pelle spent 6 months growing around Christian, Josh, Mark, and Danny before he even got them on a plane to Sweden. And when he finally did, he used every resource the natural world offered him to abruptly destabilize them. Hallucinogenic mushrooms to soften their resolve, 23.5 hours of daylight to disorient their bodies, the warmth and beauty of the Harga themselves, the smiles, the overwhelming communal joy, all of it bent towards the total domination of body and soul. Pelle singles out Danny early. He sees her grief and clocks her isolation and the meager scraps of affection her chud boyfriend feeds her, and with infinite patience, he positions the Harga as an antidote to her suffering. In our taxonomy, the strangler vine sits above the flytrap, exceeding even the malevolently hungry Brendan from Fresh. Because unlike the flytrap, the strangler vine succeeds. Danny doesn't escape the Harga ecosystem. She goes native. And here is the specific evil of the strangler vine. He spent half a year living alongside Christian and his friends, sharing beers, joints, stories, and camaraderie, all the while plotting their demise with the serene patience of something that actually photosynthesizes. And at the film's conclusion, it's Pelle who buries pieces of Josh in the garden. It's Pelle who helps feed Christian into a bear suit to be burned alive. The strangler vine's amorality is total. His patience is inhuman. And when he asks you if you feel held by him, he's already decided your answer for you. Meet James Foster, the tall drink of water who is the 4th specimen in our taxonomy. This chud married well, and that's pretty much all there is to know about him. One novel, published by the grace of his father-in-law's money and received by the literary world like a random turd left on their doorstep. Then a decade of coasting on his wife's family's wealth, gradually losing her respect, gradually losing his own, and doing precisely dick about remedying either. So James was essentially already dead on arrival when he and his wife checked into the resort at Latolka, a fictional third world of hallucinogenic brutalism and casual cloning, where he is quietly identified as a special project by a cadre of hedonistic resort regulars led by the incomparable Mia Goth. Goth, who plays Gabby, and her Swiss architect husband befriend James and his wife. They bribe a local for his car and abscond beyond the resort boundaries. A strict no-no. Binge drink, stuff themselves on whatever buffalo sausages are, and then Gabby, without preamble or explanation, butters James's toast to completion. Driving back drunk and disoriented in an uncooperative antique car, James hits and kills a local farmer. Gabby goes full Pearl and berates him into fleeing the scene. And if this isn't the action of a chud, I don't know what is. The next morning, the police come for him and he is summarily sentenced to death by stabbing, and then conveniently introduced to a get-out-of-death-free card with the mother of all caveats. Because Latolka will build a perfect double of James to receive his death sentence. Under Tolkien law, the clone is legally the same person who committed the crime and is therefore fit to die for it. And as James watches his double get stabbed to death at the stake, he feels something. A rush. Because he has just consented to bring another life into existence solely for it to be executed in the most brutal way imaginable. That double is a new individual. Despite having James's memories, he did not commit James's crime. The ethical implications are horrifying, and James does not appear to notice them. Instead, he unlocks an expensive new hobby, committing heinous crimes specifically for the death penalties they carry, just to be cloned and watch himself die again in 4K. And it all just runs together in a greasy blur of psychedelic sex, mayhem, and murder, until the Dionysian deaths and rebirths become a quasi-religious thrill-seeking ritual like the Cronenberg version of naked skydiving. Because James is the hammerhead worm. Now, the hammerhead worm in nature reproduces by fragmentation. It splits, and each piece becomes a complete organism. It's an invasive species and very hard to eradicate, and it's one of the only animals capable of consuming itself. Does that sound familiar? James's arc across Infinity Pool is one of pure fragmentation. He deliberately breaks the law to be sentenced to death, to be doubled, to watch himself die, never truly knowing whether the original self that first set foot in Latolka is dead or still bearing witness. But each time he consciously creates a copy to watch die, he's murdering a human being. His failed novel was titled The Variable Sheath, and that's exactly what the hammerhead worm has become. A fractured personality with a variable body, each copy slightly more unhinged and depersonalized than the last one. Like the parasite, James is not a predator in the classic sense of chuddish predation. His chudhood is latent. But give him a system that enables his worst impulses and shields him from consequence, and he will spend every last dollar of his wife's family's money plumbing the depths of utter depravity. At the conclusion of Infinity Pool, all the other tourists fly home to their families and their lives. James sends his surviving double home in his place. But Prime James returns to the empty resort, closed for the rainy season. He sits alone in the monsoon. He's not traumatized. In fact, far from it. For perhaps the first time in his life, he's finally truly alive. And the sad irony of the hammerhead worm is that he had to kill himself multiple times to feel that way. And now we arrive at the final specimen of today's terrible taxonomy. Men is a 2022 folk horror film from Alex Garland, in which Harper, a recently widowed woman, retreats to a cottage in the English countryside to recover from the trauma of watching her husband, the coercive man of Chud 1, end his own life, and in his final moments, foist his suicide on her like an evil curse. The English countryside doesn't help, because every man that Harper meets is the same man. The landlord, the vicar, the policeman, the boy, even the free-balling green man. Each one is the same organism, and each one shares the same underlying pathology, and all, without exception, find ways to make Harper's stay in their village a terrible one. Because the feeling the film is trying to convey to us is one of a pervasive, inevitable climate of chud. about what it feels like to move through a world where every appendage of society, every face of authority is a variation on the same uncanny male organism. And this is what makes them, collectively, the manoculture. In ecology, a monoculture is a single crop grown to the exclusion of all others, like corn or wheat. And ecologically, it's fragile. Just one blight, one agricultural disease, and the whole thing shits the bed. The manoculture grows and dies in much the same way. Harper can't find a single point of entry into this village that isn't overgrown with unwanted chuds, making her life increasingly uncomfortable. The landlord is pompous and entitled. The vicar is creepily sanctimonious and blames her for her husband's suicide. The Bobby is lackadaisical at his job and dismissive of her trauma. The boy is cruelly demanding and sullen and creepy. And Harper sees her dead husband's face, and the wounds of his suicide manifest in all of them. Each iteration of the manoculture tears itself open and produces the next. The landlord births the vicar, births the Bobby, births the boy, who births the husband. A shrieking, wailing lineage of blind need, ignored boundaries, and unexamined rage, dying and regenerating in front of her in a not-so-subtle metaphor for how chud culture propagates itself through the generations. But Harper outlasts it, because the manoculture's relentless self-replication becomes the mechanism of its own destruction. It keeps producing the next iteration until there's nothing left to produce it from. It exhausts the soil it springs from. Every specimen in this video thought that they truly understood nature. The masturbator thought he was the shark. The ringmaster thought he could manipulate and exploit a dangerous creature. The hammerhead worm thought he could consume both himself and others forever without consequence. The manoculture thought it could grow unchecked until there was nothing left but itself. And Pelle is actually what the others are pretending at being. The strangler vine is a genuine expression of the harsh ecosystem he served, who, despite his pure evil, lived in balance with the land. And in the end, he held Danny, and nature in turn held him. And horror stories can be cruel like that sometimes. If you enjoyed this video and want more of this kind of content, like and sub the channel and let me know down below what kind of terrible taxonomy I should do next, chud-centered or otherwise. I'm Goblinsburg, and I'll see you in the next one, and in the next taxonomy.